Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Butta. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Events with LifeSciences BC. Thank you so much for joining us today for our showcase series, Surrey. We are, of course, disappointed that we are not in Surrey ourselves and have had great events at the Civic Hotel the last couple of years. So we'll look forward to returning next year for 2021. But for today, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you. I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, a welcome to everybody. Also just wanted to thank our event sponsors, Silicon Valley Bank, Stem Cell Technologies, our speaker supporters, Clinical Trials BC, and the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, and our event supporter, the Surrey Board of Trade. I would encourage you to be very interactive during this session. Please use the chat function to post any comments. We also have our Q&A section, so we won't have time for a live Q&A, but you will be able to go there and upvote for any questions that you want to ask. If you're seeing the presentations and you want to see them a little bit larger, just go to the top right of your screen and you'll see the little button with the 4 arrows. That's the full screen button. After we have our 5 presentations, we're going to be doing some networking from about 4 to 4:30. And we're going to have about 3 rounds at 8 minutes each. To move from table to table, you just click on the table that you would like to join. But we do ask, please, that you stay there for the full 8 minutes and not jump around to different tables during those 8 minutes. It can be a little distracting for the other participants. And you will also see that we have our sponsors and partner areas. So I would encourage you to go and visit our wonderful sponsors and learn more about them and their speakers today. And also a reminder to upload your photo if you haven't had a chance to do that, to make it easier for people to see who you are, and to also update your links. And so I will just ask our President and CEO, Wendy Herbert. She's just going to join us on stage now. And then we will turn the event over to her. So thank you again, everybody, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of the presentations. Take care.
Thanks, Ryan, and welcome everybody. This is our 4th annual LifeSciences BC Surrey Showcase, and as Ryan said, we're excited to be here. We're sorry that we're not there in person. However, one of the advantages of being virtual is that we're able to showcase the Surrey Life Sciences innovation to a broader audience than just if we were physically in the room. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining this event from within the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Most of our speakers are joining us from other territories, and our attendees are as well, so I'd like to welcome them as well. For those of you that do not know, LifeSciences BC is a non-governmental, not-for-profit organization. Our members consist of academia, research institutions, centers of excellence and funding agencies, emerging small, medium-sized digital health, medtech, and therapeutics companies, and those that support the broad ecosystem. We're funded through membership and the generous contribution of our sponsors and partners. And this event was made possible by our event sponsors, Silicon Valley Bank and Stem Cell Technologies, our speaker supporters, Clinical Trials BC and the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, and our event supporter, the Surrey Board of Trade. Thank you very much. Your investment in LSBC and the life sciences ecosystem broadly is invaluable, and for that, we're very grateful. At each event, we like to introduce our newest members who have joined our organization recently. These are Coastal Genomics, Prompt Health, and Immunity Diagnostics. Welcome. We're always interested in welcoming new members to LSBC, so please reach out to any of us or go to the LSBC website for further information. And so now on to our program. Our first speaker is Ann Woods from the Silicon Valley Bank. She will be joining me momentarily. Ann is the Managing Director of the Life Sciences and Healthcare Practice for the Silicon Valley Bank in Toronto, where she's responsible for leading the bank's efforts in this sector across Canada, and has close to 25 years experience in capital markets and life sciences. She began her career as a financial analyst and in 2005 went back to her roots in life sciences. Prior to joining SVB, Anne spent several years as a director of the Pangea Group, bringing insights and strategic direction to life science and healthcare clients. In 2008, Anne joined the board of LifeSciences Ontario, our sister organization in that province. She holds a BSc from McGill University and an MA from the University of Guelph, as well as being a CFA charter holder. I can personally say Anne is a passionate supporter of the life sciences ecosystem, and thanks to Anne's leadership, Silicon Bank is one of our newest supporters of this series. So please make sure you reach out to her. Silicon Valley Bank is keenly interested in connecting with the life sciences ecosystem in BC. And with that, over to you, Anne.
Thanks, Wendy. So my home office is in my son's bedroom, and 3 times tonight he's walked through that door and crawled along the floor to get something. So you'll know what's happening if you see that door open. So I'm thrilled to be here. This is my first road show with the LSBC team, and I'm really looking forward to doing it in person next year if they'll have me. It sounds like it's a lot of fun. SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, and LSBC are really aligned in our mission and goals, and that we're dedicated to supporting the innovation ecosystem, and specifically my role in Canada is focused on life science and healthcare in Canada, and super excited about what's going on across the country. So for those of you that don't know us, our bank, we're a commercial bank that's 100% dedicated to innovators. We've been around for about 35 years. We've got 25,000 clients, 4,000 of those are life science and healthcare companies. So the bulk of those are in the United States. But the company really realizes that there's lots of great things going on in Canada. And so we've really doubled down on Canada. We've got just over 30 people across the country, including 2 in Vancouver. Also really focused on growing our business through life science and healthcare. So about 1.5 years ago, we acquired a company called Llewellyn out of Boston, which is an investment bank. So doing a sort of end-to-end full life cycle services with life science companies, right from very first bank account all the way to exit. So I'm glad to be here to share some good news in what has been a year filled with sort of frustration and bad news for many people. But I don't think any of us can deny that it's really been a multi-year boom in life science investing. And when I started my career 25 years ago, big pharma was really kicking off this decade-long sort of time of real mega mergers, which resulted in a big shift in how innovation and drug discovery happened. So while the big guys were focused on what they do best, which is late-stage clinical development and commercialization, innovation was really left to the little guys, and those little guys needed capital. And so I would argue that those mega mergers that happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago, really set in motion the growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years. So, if you look at venture funds in the United States that are dedicated to life science and healthcare investing, in 2010, they raised $1.8 billion. And if you roll the clock forward 10 years, so in 2019, the funds that were looking to invest in life science and healthcare investing raised $11 billion. If we just look at the first half of 2020, funds focused on healthcare investing raised $10.4 billion in just the first half. And so what we're seeing is more and larger funds that are looking to invest in life sciences. And we're also seeing a lot of interest from generalist funds, so funds that typically didn't invest in life sciences. So another factor behind this record pace of venture capital fundraising are the lofty exits and IPO activity. So companies being acquired, but also companies going public. So if we just look at biopharma companies, over the last 2 years, there's been well over 100 IPOs. And then if we carve out what I call the class of 2020, the average sort of bump in stock price after they went public was 80%. So you can see why more and more investors are looking at the sector. So lots of money being raised by venture capital funds, but has this translated, or how has this translated into actual investments into companies? So if we look globally, the amount of dollars invested in both 2018 and 2019 was $30 billion into life science and healthcare companies. And 2020, first half of 2020, $20 billion. So the one thing that's important to note is this momentum was happening before COVID. In fact, there was some concern in the spring that there may be some dark days ahead. I think a number of people remained bullish, including SVB, but I don't think any of us really realized how significant the impact would be. So, we see our sector really solidified as an asset class for investors. But I think what's also important is it caught the attention of governments. And it's that science and research is not only going to get us out of COVID, but it's going to provide that foundation for economic recovery after COVID. And so dare I say that perhaps we've reached this moment in time where, the public purse and the governments that control it see healthcare maybe as an investment opportunity as opposed to a cost center. So all of that data tells us, great, we're in the midst of a global biotech bull market, but how has Canada fared in this? So if we look at some data from BDC, we see that their life science focused funds have been their best performing funds with twice the rate of return of non-life science funds. The top 5 deals, when we look at the top 5 venture deals in the first half, 2 of those were life science. When I did this presentation a few weeks ago, we had 2 major IPOs. That's now 3 major IPOs. And what we saw is from 2013 to 2019, 4 times as much capital has been invested in the life science sector, going from $270 million in 2013 to over $1.1 billion in 2019. In the first half of 2020, we've already matched that $1.1 billion and exceeded it. So somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 billion invested in the first half of 2020. So are we punching above our weight? We know we've got world-class science. We know we've got great institutions. We've got biotech entrepreneurs with a track record. We've got an ability to attract talent back from the US to Canada. And so, it depends on who you talk to. If I talk to the venture capitalists in Canada, they'll say, you know what, if we look at the 10% rule, are we, the venture capitalists, raising as much money, getting as much attention from Canadian investors as our US colleagues are? And we're not. But if we look at the amount of money that's invested into Canadian companies compared to globally, so if we just look at the first half of 2020, 1.2 billion went into Canadian companies, 20 billion globally, that really puts us at about 6% of global dollars are going into Canadian companies. And if you think we're 3% of GDP, then I would say we're doing pretty good. We're definitely punching above our weight. So naturally, the next question is, okay, Canada's punching above its weight, but this is an LSBC presentation. So let's see what's happening in BC. So there's a great report on the LSBC website that was a partnership with the BC government that highlights, I think, some really interesting stats. So life sciences is one of the fastest growing sectors in the province, both in terms of company creation and number of employees. And while it's third in size when you compare the number of companies in Ontario to Ontario and Quebec, it's actually growing faster than both of those provinces. Now, when you really kind of drill into the details, though, BC life sciences companies really attract an outsized amount of BC dollars when compared to other provinces. So over the past several years, 40% of the BC dollars invested in BC went to life science companies versus only 15% in the rest of Canada. And of course, without question, the largest companies and the largest deals are happening in British Columbia. So Zymeworks, Xenon, Aurinia, Sierra, Chinook, Aspect, and of course, AbCellera. 3 of those companies now have multi-billion-dollar valuations. So BC is home to the largest biotech company with stem cell technologies and Canada's largest full-service medical device product development company with Starfish. So all of this means that the rest of the country is thrilled that we're going to be able to tap into all of that talent that's coming out of BC. It's really giving us a great foundation. Great science, of course, great entrepreneurship, but that track record of success, hopefully is going to spread across the country to make all of Canada successful. So the future is bright, and I'm really excited about what the next 5 to 10 years holds for us. So with that, I will hand the floor back to Ryan or Wendy.
Hi, Anne. Thank you very much. Wow, I'm going to get you to do my speeches for me in the future. All those great statistics about life sciences, I couldn't agree more. And of course, one that we should all be celebrating is yesterday's AbCellera performance on the NASDAQ, because I think we now officially have also the home to the largest IPO, if that's correct. So
right.
another one to add. And the BC Life Sciences ecosystem has always been performing very strong, and clearly 2020 really put many of these companies on the map. So thanks very much for that overview. I'm now going to introduce Bev Holmes, who is the president and CEO of the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research. And she is going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Kenna Hayashi. Bev, are you there? Oh, there we go. Oh, you're on mute.
Am I here? Thanks.
You are here.
Okay,
thanks, Bev. Over to you.
Thank you, and thanks, Anne. That was a really motivating talk. I learned actually a lot in that short presentation, and I share your optimism that governments are now looking at research in life sciences like they maybe haven't in the past because of COVID-19. So that's one thing we can take away. And then also, just in case you were wondering, your son did not sneak into the bedroom behind you while you were talking. Hi, everybody. Bev Holmes. I'm the CEO of Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, and I'm joining you from my home in Vancouver. I am also on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. And I want to thank Wendy and LifeSciences BC for organizing another great event that really shines a spotlight on research and life sciences. This time, the community in Surrey, and my team at the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research is really pleased to be part of this community. And as we were talking about earlier today, while we were getting ready for this meeting, we're really looking forward to the time when we can connect in person again. For those of you who may not, we are BC, and we in turn are funded by the provincial government, and our mandate is research talent development. So we help attract and retain and develop the talent that BC needs to advance knowledge and to move that knowledge into practice and policy for better health, and also to strengthen the knowledge economy. And in a province as large and geographically diverse as British Columbia, it's really important to support research talent that is focused on the priorities of local communities, the capabilities, the opportunities, and of course, the needs of local communities. And relevant today, of course, as you well know, COVID-19 has hit Fraser Health really hard, harder than other health authorities, and research resources have been stretched really thin. So in response, last week, our foundation announced that through funding to Fraser Health in partnership with the Surrey Hospital Foundation, we helped hire essential research personnel at Surrey Memorial Hospital. So these are research personnel who are going to be doing real-time research for the benefit of patient care. And I would encourage you to look at our website if you want to find out more about those awards. Another way that we support talent development is through our funding competitions, and they support researchers who are focused on the really big health issues that British Columbians are facing. And one of those is the dual challenge of not only COVID-19, but the opioid epidemic. And the impacts of both of those health challenges are significant for thousands of people across the province. And on that note, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Dr. Kenna Hayashi. She is working with colleagues at the BC Centre on Substance Use and Simon Fraser University on the evaluation of innovative risk mitigation services in the context of the dual crises of COVID-19 and overdose among people who use opioids. Kenna is the St. Paul's Hospital Chair in Substance Use Research. She's assistant professor in the Faculty of Health Sciences at SFU. She's a research scientist at the BC Centre on Substance Use, and her research expertise includes epidemiology, community-based research, public health and human rights, substance use, and health services for drug-using populations. She's won a number of prestigious awards, including the Royal Society of Canada's Alice Wilson Award, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research New Investigator Award, and last but definitely not least, a Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research Scholar Award. Kenna, thank you for your important work in this important area, and over to you to tell us more.
Thank you very much, Bev. And then good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the organizer for inviting me to talk about our research project. Oops, are we showing my slides or I can't see it? Ryan? Okay. Yeah, maybe I will just move on. Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to,
we were showing your slides.
Oh, you're showing my slides? Okay.
You're all good.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. Oh, I now see it in a small window. Okay. Yeah, I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to talk about the research on opioid use and COVID and overdose prevention that I've been working with my colleagues at the SFU and the BC Center on Substance Use. And this project has been funded by Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research. Thank you very much. And the CIHR since September this year. Because this is a really fairly a new project. The data have not been available yet for analysis. So what I'm going to do today is to really present what we plan to do and why we are doing this work. Can you move on to the next slide, please? I'd like to start by acknowledging that this research is going to be undertaken on the unceded traditional homelands of Coast Salish peoples, including Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, everyone knows that we've been in a public health emergency due to COVID-19 since March this year, but as Bev has introduced, BC has been contending with another 4-year-long public health emergency due to high rates of illicit drug toxicity deaths, or we call it drug overdose deaths, since 2016. And this is mainly due to the increasing contamination of the local illicit drug supply with illicitly manufactured fentanyl. I'm showing the picture here as a white powder, and then that is really a potent opioid that is really killing people. And the overdose death rates have been decreasing, fortunately, in 2019. However, since the COVID started, then the rates started to increase again. And now we are actually having the highest number ever recorded. So we are just keeping the record-breaking number of overdose deaths in this province. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah. So when the COVID pandemic started in March, we already knew that public health measures such as physical distancing were expected to pose significant challenges to addressing the ongoing overdose crisis. So for example, physical distancing can risk interrupting access to essential overdose prevention services, such as opioid agonist therapy, which is the gold standard treatment for people with suffering from opioid use disorder. Therefore, early in the pandemic, in March 2020, the BC government launched very innovative interventions to reduce the risk of the both COVID-19 infection and overdose, which is shown here in this slide. The first one is the to relax the OAT prescription guidelines to encourage OAT prescribers to consider a range of means such as take-home doses and medication delivery to support physical distancing and prevent the disruption of this important treatment among their patients. The second one is called pandemic prescribing. This allowed physicians and nurse practitioners to prescribe certain pharmaceuticals, such as opioids and stimulants, to people who use those illicit drugs. Both these two interventions are providing pharmaceutical alternatives to the toxic illicit drug supply, and they're intended to reduce both physical encounters involved in obtaining illicit drugs and the consumption of the toxic street drugs, thereby supporting both overdose and COVID-19 prevention efforts. However, the impacts of these BC-made innovative interventions have not been evaluated yet. Due to the emergency situation, the BC health authorities were compelled to introduce these interventions without a solid scientific evaluation plan. So that's why we propose our research to do a preliminary evaluation of these two interventions. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So what we are trying to do is there's twofold research objectives. So we are trying to characterize the uptake of and the barriers to accessing these two services among people who use mostly illicit opioids, and then also to estimate the potential health, social, and economic impacts of these interventions. So together, the interventions have been implemented only for since March. So we recognize this research to provide preliminary evidence on these two interventions. Next slide, please. So the key for this evaluation is to collect some data on people's lived experiences, accessing or not having barriers accessing these two interventions. In order to do that, we are utilizing or leveraging the vast research infrastructure afforded by the existing ongoing large studies of people who use drugs in Vancouver. It's called 3 studies called Virus Access and Arise. I'm not gonna go into too much details about these studies, but those 3 studies are harmonized studies following people using drugs in community settings, not only in the treatment or clinical settings, and following people every 6 months to ask people about their lives through interviewer-administered questionnaire. And utilizing this infrastructure, we're adding a bunch of questions about these 2 interventions to collect people's lived experience related to these 2 interventions. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is just an example of the questions we have added to our existing questionnaire to these 3 studies. And we, in addition to those 2 interventions, we also added a bunch of questions about COVID in general as well. And this survey has been introduced in July earlier this year. And then since then, we have started to interview people over the phone or Zoom who are already enrolled in one of those 3 studies that we are running. And in December, so this month, we actually updated this questionnaire to add more questions about these 2 interventions and get more details about people's challenges accessing these interventions, or some success stories about by accessing these interventions. And then that piece has been funded by Michael Smith and CIHR, so that we expect to implement this questionnaire until May this year, next year, and then we're going to start analyzing those data in spring. Can you go back, next slide, please? Yeah, so as I said, since July this year, we have already started to collect some data on COVID and these 2 interventions. And then so far, we have reached 888 people who are using drugs and getting their lived experience about these about their lives and then these 2 interventions. So this number is going to increase since we are going to be expanding interview process starting in this month, so that when the data become available, I would be happy to come back here and present more the results from this research project. Next slide, please. Yeah, I just want to just finish this short presentation by acknowledging and thanking all the research participants, and then also staff, trainees, and fellow colleagues at SFU and the BC Center on Substance Use. It's just so doing phone interviews with people who use drugs has been really, really challenging, as you can imagine. But we have such a good rapport with our participants, and so that made us enabled us to interview those closely near 900 people within the few months. So that is, we consider that a big accomplishment. And of course, the funders of this research project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hayashi. Very interesting and certainly important research that is being undertaken right now. So we look forward to hearing more, and be sure to let us know when the appropriate time is to next update us when the research comes in. Our next speaker is Dr. David Llewellyn. He is the Senior Vice President of Business Operations at Stem Cell Technologies, Canada's largest biotechnology company. David is a champion of stem cells' mandate to advance science, which he supports at the executive level by ensuring the company is well positioned for long-term growth and profitability. David started his career at Stem Cell in 2006 as a business development officer. Today, he oversees the company's marketing communications department, pricing, project management office, e-commerce division, and several of its products teams. I know that he has been super busy as Stem Cell Technologies has had to pivot through COVID-19, so he may touch on a little bit of that. David has a BSc in chemistry from the University of Northern British Columbia, a PhD in organic chemistry from McGill University, and an MBA in strategic management from the University of British Columbia. David is also a passionate supporter of LifeSciences BC and is an active member on the LifeSciences BC board. And with that, David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Okay, yeah, thanks, Wendy. I'm not gonna talk too much about stem cell today. Actually, what I wanted to talk about was building biomanufacturing capacity in Canada, and then we'll talk a little bit at the end about the role that stem cells playing here. You know, if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic and over the last 9 months, COVID-19 has really exposed some critical gaps in Canada's ability to respond during a pandemic. If you go right back to the beginning, you know, in March when it first came to Canada and when it first started to spread worldwide, there was, you know, this massive increase in the demand for diagnostic testing reagents. And the companies that supply these diagnostic testing reagents were not able to keep up with that demand or to ramp up their manufacturing quick enough so that, you know, the various countries could respond effectively. And so this led to some very critical failures in the supply chain on multiple fronts. There were situations in Canada where some testing labs, you know, at times had as little as 1 or 2 days of supplies on hand. So it was really quite a critical situation. And, you know, it has got better over the next months as companies have scaled, but there's still major supply issues that do exist, and it still is an ongoing problem. And then you're starting to see the same thing on the vaccine side, where the vaccines are getting approved, but there's just not enough manufacturing capacity worldwide to make them quick enough. And so there's delays in some of the rolls out. And you've seen this in the news where, you know, Trudeau was warning that the vaccine's not going to come to Canada as quickly as it came to other countries. And so, you know, the limited diagnostic testing capacity, the ability not to be able to respond quickly when these types of things happen, and the delays in access to the vaccines, these are all likely to have, you know, these will and will continue to have significant impacts on both, you know, our health and our economy. And so the underlying issue here is that Canada doesn't have a lot of biomanufacturing capacity. You know, it has the expertise and it has the knowledge, but it doesn't have, and it can do it on a small scale, but it can't manufacture diagnostic tests. You know, it can't manufacture therapeutics, and it can't manufacture vaccines on the scale that is needed in order to respond to a pandemic. And so we are almost 100% reliant on foreign suppliers to supply these critical tools when fighting in an emergency like this. And the issue here is that, you know, the foreign suppliers don't always prioritizing supplying the Canadian market first. You know, they're often directed to supply the market where they're operating, you know, as a requirement, or they sometimes will prioritize the larger markets where they can kind of make the most revenue as a priority over smaller countries like Canada. And so the Canadian government has recognized this, and they're making a lot of very important, very good strategic investments to help address the issue. You know, there was an announcement over the last couple of months where they've invested in the NRC in Montreal to build some vaccine production capabilities. They've invested in another vaccine company in Montreal to do some manufacturing as well. There's been a couple of investments in BC itself. You had Precision Nanosystems. They received some government funding to help to develop some RNA vaccines, and Accelera received some funding to build a facility to manufacture therapeutic antibodies. And there's a lot of signaling and a lot of indication that there's going to be more investment coming in this area as they try to address these gaps that have been exposed. So on November 30th, just a little while ago, Freeland released Canada's fall economic statement. And if you kind of read that statement closely, you'll notice that there's $100 billion investment coming, you know, when the vaccine rolls out and people are kind of vaccinated and the economy can kind of ramp back up. And that $100 billion investment is designed to really accelerate the economic recovery. And they highlighted investments in biomanufacturing as an area that they want to invest in the country so that the country does have these capabilities within this border. So this is really, really great. It's really, really needed. But the thing I wanted to highlight is that in order to properly address this issue, you can't just build the facility to manufacture the vaccines or manufacture the antibodies or manufacture the diagnostic tests. You also have to take a step down the supply chain, and you have to look at what's required in order to manufacture these different tools, right? So you can't manufacture the vaccines unless you have access to the cell culture media, the stabilizers, you know, the mRNA manufacturing if it's an RNA type vaccine. The same thing for the diagnostics. You have to have large-scale enzyme expression and purification capabilities, you know, a large-scale oligonucleotide synthesis and magnetic particle manufacturing. And if you really look at, you know, why there was such a shortage of diagnostic testing reagents, as an example, you'll see that the issue is with a lot of the issues are with the supply of these underlying components that go into it, like particularly magnetic particle manufacturing. It's very difficult to scale magnetic particle manufacturing. And a lot of the shortages were a result of, you know, the companies that made the diagnostic tests not being able to source the magnetic particles. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, if you want to, you know, make some therapeutic antibodies and you want to buy the cell culture media to make those antibodies, the lead time on the cell culture media right now is about 9 months. So even if you have the facility, you got to have the capability to make the reagents that go into it. And so, you know, this is an important consideration for the government when they're thinking about where to invest, and for companies when they're thinking about how they can help address this. Is, you know, you got to look at the entire supply chain and the entire value chain in order to make sure you have an effective response. And so stem cell is, you know, we are involved in the COVID-19 response quite heavily in multiple different areas. I'll just highlight 2 examples of the role that we're playing. Again, if you go right back to the beginning when the virus first started to spread, the first time the virus was isolated was at the China Center for Disease Control. And they actually ended up propagating the virus and growing it in some of our media products. And, you know, by being able to propagate the virus in our media products and then isolate it and sequence the DNA, that really formed the basis of a lot of the vaccines, and it formed the basis of a lot of the diagnostic tests. And we're also working directly with the BC Cancer Agency, UBC, and the BC Center of Disease Control to actually develop and manufacture diagnostic reagents for testing. So that's on the short term. And in the long term, we are making a significant long-term investment to build more biomanufacturing capacity in Canada for the reagents that are required to make these different components. So a couple of years ago, we made an investment of $138 million in an advanced biologics manufacturing facility. 93 million was from stem cell, 22.5 million from the federal government, and 22.5 million from the BC government. And this is a great investment. It brought a lot of our manufacturing back to Canada and created hundreds of new jobs. And this facility is being built in Burnaby, just at the base of SFU. So here's a picture of the warehouse. It's kind of mid-renovation right now. It's quite a large. This is going to be quite a large facility with storage and distribution, manufacturing, and quality control, and office space and stuff like that. And so it is on track to be completed in 2022. So not too far off. And here's some diagrams, some conceptual diagrams of what it's going to look like, or at least part of it when it's completed. But the design for this facility and the focus for this facility was set, several years ago before COVID hit. And so it's not that it really doesn't have the what's needed, the infrastructure that's needed in order to make a lot of the other components that are required for diagnostic tests. This facility is really for GMP manufacturing of cell culture media and other supplies for use in cell and gene therapy. And so, in order to be able to supply, the other reagents that are required for these diagnostics, these therapeutics, and these vaccines, there is going to be additional investment required in order to build that capacity. But stem cell is very well positioned to play a major role in this response. We have the required technology, we have the required expertise. The reagents that are needed for an effective pandemic response are very well aligned with the products that we already manufacture. We manufacture magnetic particles on scale for our cell separation instruments, where we are a liquid media company. We do a lot of molecular biology and stuff like that. The facility is also secured and shovel ready for the required expansion. So we're all set and ready to go. And I think an important consideration here too is that during a pandemic, the scale and the volume that you need to kind of deliver these supplies at is much higher than what you would normally do during, when you're in just kind of normal times. And so, I think one of the advantages that stem cell has is, as we build these facilities out and as we kind of develop these capabilities, we're able to use them to manufacture our other products and our other reagents, and just expand the business in general. So it allows you to kind of, have that capacity there that can respond immediately and at scale when needed. But during normal times, it's still a profitable business to run, and it's still driving the economy. Yep. So that's all I had. I wanted to thank you for having me here, Wendy. It's great to be able to present.
Thanks, David. Very interesting presentation, and certainly very topical. And as you adequately talked about, COVID-19 really did expose a number of significant gaps in our medical supply chain. And so it's wonderful to see that there's some investment in that area coming. And hopefully we as BC, who are super well positioned to receive some of that funding, will be able to take advantage of that as we build out our supply chain capabilities. I'd now like to introduce Allison Orth, who is the Unit Director for Clinical Trials BC. Allison, if you can join me on the virtual stage. Allison is going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. Thanks so much for hosting this event and to showcase all the great things that are happening out in Surrey. Clinical Trials BC is a unit of the BC Academic Health Science Network, and we support clinical trial investigators, sites, and institutions to ensure a world-class destination for clinical trials in British Columbia. Our focus is really on infrastructure and capacity building with a collaborative approach, and we work to enable clinical trial excellence for BC. Some of the services we provide include access to a range of training, guidance, and resources for researchers and clinical research personnel. And we recently launched a provincially harmonized clinical trial management system program for the province to advance efficiencies within clinical trial operations. Fraser Health is participating in this initiative, and they have their first site that will be implementing this month. I would like to introduce today the next speaker, Chris Condon, and I had the pleasure of working with Chris in my previous role at Fraser Health, and we worked to support clinical trials for the prevention of C. difficile at that time. Chris is the clinical research lead at Surrey Memorial Hospital, located in Fraser Health Region. Chris works with teams throughout the site at Surrey Memorial to develop, implement, and carry out research studies of all types. He also leads the recently established COVID-19 research team. This was enabled and funded by the Surrey Hospitals Foundation and the Mike Foundation for Health Research. In his talk today, he will discuss some of the experiences, challenges, and silver linings of operationalizing COVID-19 research during a public health emergency. Welcome, Chris.
I am just muted here, and I'll thank you, Allison, for the kind introduction, and my great pleasure to be with you today. I'll just start by sharing my screen, and I'll just quickly also acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Semiahmoo First Nation. So I'll just confirm, is my screen shared properly now? Okay, somebody will yell if it's not.
You're good.
I can just see. So I'll jump right into it. I don't have any disclosures today, and in our short time today, I want to tell you a little bit about the hospital that I work at, Surrey Memorial Hospital, and some of the, I guess, challenges that we've been working through. David, your talk really resonated with me as well in terms of exposing some of the gaps in responding to COVID from a clinical research perspective. I want to start though quickly with a brief plug for my team within Fraser Health. I'm part of a group in the health region called the Department of Evaluation and Research Services, and we manage, support, and help to undertake all kinds of research, clinical trials, data collection, and we also provide consultative services to teams or investigators who want to undertake research or make use of our data within the health authority. So I'm very lucky to work with a team of really smart and enthusiastic cheerleaders for research and evidence-based care within our health authority, and we offer a range of services really from the beginning of a research study right through to ethics, implementation, data collection, and then knowledge dissemination. So just a quick plug for my team, and in my role, I'm the site lead at our hospital, Surrey Memorial Hospital, for research, and also the associated outpatient center, which you probably know is called the Jim Pattison Outpatient Center. It's one of the biggest ambulatory care clinics in Western Canada. And so here's a picture of our crown jewel, the Critical Care Tower, which opened in 2014. We're the largest of 3 regional hospitals within Fraser Health. Fraser Health being the health authority, the largest in BC, also the most prominent in the COVID situation that's unfolding. And at SMH, we have 634 beds. So we're really quite a large hospital. And you might not know that we're also the second largest hospital in the province and the busiest emergency department in the province, and in fact, one of the largest in the country. So we'll be seeing this year upwards of 200,000 patient visits within our emergency room, and we'll admit over 40,000 inpatients. And because we have this nice modern facility with modern isolation rooms and single occupancy beds, we have been a prominent site within the pandemic response. We have 51 critical care beds at SMH. And this is my cat, Merlin. And it's actually what he looks like in real life, believe it or not. And I think that Merlin provides a nice metaphor for how research was functioning at SMH in the pre-COVID times. we were all really humming along quite happily. We had a tremendous fire in our bellies for research and producing evidence-based knowledge. Our eyes burned bright with a love for science, and our entire team are really huge advocates for research within the health system. But our program, I think, like Merlin's belly, was really expanding at a slow and controlled rate. You know, we were bringing on more studies. But certainly, we had enough to keep our small team busy, and it was a story of, I guess, controlled expansion. Merlin, by the way, is quite a bit larger now. He's been eating his sister's food. And of course, you know, I don't need to tell you that COVID happened, and we saw quickly how research can become really an integral pillar to the COVID response. But for us at Fraser Health, that came with, you know, its own challenges. We had just this massive mobilization of scientific research infrastructure, and really for us, an avalanche of studies coming forward on COVID as research ethics boards and Health Canada fast-tracked approvals. Millions of dollars was funding for research was released, you know, with very good reason in a very short time period. And so these figures are from earlier this month, but in Fraser we had around 60 studies that have come forward and 30 that have been approved and are in various stages of implementation. And really all manner of research, you know, data collection, clinical trials, sample collection studies, and biobanking. And it has presented a whole slew of logistical challenges, and I can only tell you about a couple of them today. But of course, one of the big ones was that we had investigators, physicians, who really wanted to be a part of the research response to COVID, but really didn't necessarily have the experience or the training that they needed, for example, to run a Health Canada regulated clinical trial. And so we very quickly ran up against this question about, well, how do we get all of these people who want to be part of the scientific response to COVID trained up and able to do this in a safe manner with things like GCP Division 5 training, TCPS2, you know, there's all of these, research is a very, as you know, I'm sure, highly regulated domain. And so I think our hospital wasn't alone really in struggling with the sheer volume of research proposals that were coming forward, and the question of, you know, how could we rally personnel quickly to support some of these studies. And as we delved down into the details, we found that there were a number of things that really needed some serious thinking. You know, we realized quite quickly that in order to run any type of clinical trial safely, we really needed research nursing support. You know, some of these patients were very complex. They were potentially going to be on an investigational drug about which, you know, we didn't necessarily know much. And we found that resource really was hard to find. Those types of personnel are typically brought on ad hoc, but we were in a period, particularly early on, and we're starting to see this again with a real nursing shortage. We ran into really, you know, what would normally be quite simple questions. You know, how can we actually access the data? And believe it or not, even in a modern unit, much of the clinical information on a patient is still stored at the bedside in paper binders, some progress notes, and medication logs. And so there was this big, really big feasibility piece around how we could access these spaces, given the risk involved, and in particular, and certainly in the first phases of the pandemic, you know, limited PPE supply, which is a real concern. And of course, all of the fear and the anxiety and how quickly things were changing. We had staff who were being redeployed, and we had the challenge of, you know, we were talking a lot with our clinical colleagues around, can we use bedside nurses for some of this work? And you know, there was a lot of ethical and operational discussion, because really when you're taking somebody into to undertake a research study, you're pulling them away from the bedside, and those people were in very high demand and still are. So we've really had to work through a number of logistical issues, things like telephone consent, and how do you actually connect with the patient, how do you monitor for adverse events, and that sort of thing. Another issue that's come up, and this is a provincial discussion really, and Bev touched on it as well, is around variability in research infrastructure. And in some of our, planning and the response to COVID, we've realized that, really inequities in research infrastructure can result in inequities in access to, for example, clinical trial opportunities for promising therapeutics. And so we found that hospitals who had established research programs, for example, in critical care, which is where a lot of the research first the clinical research anyways first started, were able to really get these research programs off the ground quite quickly, and they were at an advantage. But everywhere, across the province, we all wanted to be contributing to the effort to bring research opportunities and the best care to our patients. And so we have had a lot of discussions around equity and how can we, promote equity in our research response. But I think there's really some tremendous silver linings, as we've some of the other speakers have talked about. There's been a spotlight on a great many barriers and challenges as a result of COVID. But I think in like so many things about this pandemic, we've really learned how the strength of collaboration and working together can help us to solve some big problems. And so in that regard, I do think that there is this tremendous silver lining that we're seeing emerging, through this difficult year. Certainly in research, we have a recognition now among our leadership and within government that, research is a robust research infrastructure is really important for healthcare. And we have some really powerful collaborations and networks for research across the province that have emerged. And so I'm so thankful, for example, to the Michael Smith Foundation and to the Surrey Hospitals Foundation for the recently announced funding to build our research capacity, and to the leadership for the Academic Health Sciences Network and Clinical Trials BC, who have really led the way in bringing stakeholders together to help us to develop a coordinated strategy and to provide the resources where they're needed. And I've included a photo here of one of our new research coordinators, Susan, and she's holding around 200 COVID blood plasma samples that we were able to collect as part of a study, and send to labs that we're collaborating with in Ottawa and Victoria and Calgary. So I guess, yeah, I'll end a bit on the silver lining, and we can talk more about it. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. We look forward to connecting during the networking. I'm sure people will source you out and want to discuss what you just presented. I am just going to introduce our last speaker, and then we are going to have our networking session. So Anita Huberman, who is no stranger to most people in Surrey, is joining us. Anita is the CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade. She's also on the SFU President's Advisory Council and the SFU India Advisory Council. She's the co-chair of the Surrey Local Immigration Partnership Committee, and nationally she's been a trustee of Canada's National Film Board for 6 years. Huberman holds the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and was the recipient of the 2011 Business in Vancouver's Top 40 Under 40 Award, and was recognized with the Canada 150 Community Medal. Anita has been a trailblazer advocating for change for business and for all of Surrey at all levels of government. Anita, we're thrilled to have you join us. If you could please turn on your camera and join. There we go.
Thank you so much. So I'm Anita Huberman. I'm CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia, And I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen-Katzie Semiahmoo and Tawasin First Nations. You know, the Surrey Board of Trade, our whole mandate is to support business and bring business into the city. We've been in Surrey for more than 100 years. And the thing is, you know, during the pandemic, you would think that the Surrey Board of Trade wouldn't have anything to do, but when the pandemic hit in the middle of March, we invoked ground zero principles to help our business community, to ensure that Surrey continued to be a prosperous place to do business, and as I always say, an opportunity city. Many of our businesses were deemed essential, and they were able to stay open, to continue to thrive. We were able to ship goods nationally, internationally. We have the greatest number of manufacturers in British Columbia, right here in Surrey. And I remember a phone call that I received from our Health and Technology District by the Lark Group, just across the street from our Surrey Memorial Hospital. And they said, Anita, we're having trouble keeping open under these new provincial health orders that were issued in March. And we are an essential service. We are building Surrey's Health and Technology District. We are helping ensure that we have solutions for the pandemic. So we were very lucky to be one of 9 organizations as part of the Premier's Economic Recovery Council. And so I phoned the Premier's office and I said, this is what our Health and Technology District needs. This is why they're an essential service. And that day they were given approval to be an essential service. And so that's what we've been doing. We have been meeting with the Premier every week, identifying gaps and opportunities. We have a direct line into the Prime Minister's office, also identifying gaps and opportunities. And we formed a Surrey Economic Recovery Coalition doing the very same thing with the City of Surrey. But the thing is that we also needed to ensure in the midst of this pandemic that Surrey was still seen as an opportunity city. We're still growing by 1,400 people a month. Our population soon will surpass Vancouver's. We're at 580,000. We have the most industrial land inventory in Metro Vancouver. We have 104 different languages that are spoken. We are having a second hospital being built in Surrey. We have an innovative Surrey Memorial Hospital that is partnering with the Health and Technology District to realize solutions, healthcare solutions for our young to our seniors. And that hospital continues to grow and continues to support our growing community. 1/3 of our population is under the age of 19, and we have an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is a partnership between business, private sector, healthcare, and government. And that means that there are so many opportunities, a significant human capital to be able to serve this entrepreneurial ecosystem that is the life sciences industry that we're focusing on this afternoon. My message really to you is that we have significant one-of-a-kind resources that no other Chamber of Commerce Board of Trade has. We released Surrey's first ever workforce strategy. We released Surrey's first ever labor market intelligence report last October. And now we're doing them on a monthly basis with a partnership with the BC government until July next year as we go through the pandemic. Surrey, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very important to BC's economic paradigm. And the life sciences industry, in partnership with our hospitals, the new medical facility that is going to be built at Simon Fraser University, the nursing program at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, our population, our human capital that continues to grow even with our newcomer population. These are all assets to your industry. And I'm here to tell you that we are in Surrey a life science hub. We spoke recently with BC's new Innovation Commissioner. I spoke briefly with BC's new Economic Recovery Minister, and in fact have another meeting with him next week to really hone in on the possibilities and needed investments and private sector partnerships between healthcare, private sector, education, and government that we can ensure that Surrey continues to be an opportunity city. We see all over the world in hubs like Australia, the UK, all over the world, where there are so many possibilities to deliver primary care solutions for families. We've seen so many different innovations around digital health. Our workforces, for example, through the Surrey Board of Trade, have access to digital advice around healthcare through our own insurance program. That was an innovation that was built through the Surrey Board of Trade and actually through our Chamber of Commerce and Board of Trade industry in our nation during the pandemic. I'm just here to tell you that Surrey is an opportunity city. We are a talent innovation lab, and we're here to work with you and for you. And Surrey is so exciting, and absolutely with a growing city, we have our own challenges, but we work through those challenges together. If you need anything, just let us know. We're so proud to be part of this Life Science Showcase series again with Ryan and Wendy. And if you need anything, check us out at businessinsurrey.com or email me, Anita, at businessinsurrey.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita. That's great, and I couldn't agree more on the opportunities for all of British Columbia and particularly in Surrey and Vancouver and some of our other hubs. It's
Sorry, we just had some technical troubles there, but all is good. So we are just now going to go into the networking. And before we do that, I just wanted to remind everybody we've got a whole bunch of great events coming up. So I would encourage you to do that and to go on to our website. And also, we're now just going to go to the table. So we are going to probably do, just based on time, we're probably going to do 2 rounds of 8 minutes each. So I will have the timer on and then just make a notice when it's time to switch. So thank you again to all of our wonderful speakers. It was great presentations today, and I will look forward to seeing everybody in the networking. Thank you very much, then. Bye-bye.